Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pretend World's Real People. As always, my name is Tyler, and if you didn't notice, it is March of 2022 already. How is it March? There's a deeper reason for why I'm so flabbergasted as to how this year is going by so fast. I'm turning 30 in 2 months. How I don't even know how to navigate that. What is there? I feel like I'm just now getting into my own zone. I'm becoming who I've wanted to become, and it's scary. I'm turning 30 already. I know it's not a crazy birthday, but I I don't know. I'm still having not anxiety, but just wondering, how can I shed the I should have done this by the time I was 30. I should have done that by the time I was 30. I'm just trying to shed all that out. I don't know. I don't know how to do it. I think I found one way though. I'm just going to focus on this podcast for sure, in addition to hopefully more self tapes that I can accrue over the next couple of weeks. I'm just going to have fun with it. I've written down so many plans for this podcast for this summer, and there's something really big that's coming up soon. I won't tell you about yet, but I'm so freaking excited for it. It's going to be amazing, everybody. I won't spoil it. It does involve some past guests, some new guests. I'm just getting all the logistics out of the way, but it's going to be a freaking ride. Well, without any more of a delay, let's get into this week's episode. I want to ask you, where in the world is Natasha Walford? That's the question that we are going to answer in this episode. She is an Australian producer, filmmaker, writer, and assistant director that is currently working on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and worked on Peacemaker up in Canada when they were in production. Her story alone is incredible. Going from Australia and then just basically trekking the globe to build her career to end up where she is now, and that's not the end game. She has so much more planned. Oh my god, she's super cool. I'm very lucky to hopefully call her a new buddy because she is just she's awesome. She works like crazy, and given all that, I had to ask her, what are some of your comfort shows? What was COVID like? What is it planning a future and a career like this? Like what are your goals? What are your dreams? And she has a lot of them, and she's going to accomplish every single one of them. So, without further ado, let's sit down and talk with Natasha Walford.
My name is Natasha Walford, and I am currently a producer, director's assistant on Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And I'm also a producer, writer, and assistant director.
So you do everything, essentially.
Yeah, like most in this industry.
I'm curious, like how did you get started? What was your point of inception to say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this?
Well, growing up, most of my favorite childhood memories have always been using, the family's camcord and kind of bossing around my neighbors to do certain productions, whether it be, renditions of kid shows or the news or anything like that. So I kind of luckily always knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be involved in the entertainment industries in some capacity. And it wasn't until I was about 16 I started university, and straight away, I was just signing up for any type of internship program I could, and always kind of bugging my university professors to see if they had any jobs I could do for them. And from there, in university, I started my own little production company, and that was really great. We got to kind of produce and make a lot of social media marketing, and we were involved a lot in creating music festivals and cinematic theatrical productions. And I was able to find a mentor, Troy Armstrong, in that process. And through that, I kind of left university and decided to pursue a career full time. And I wasn't really happy at how fast my career was progressing within Australia, because we are kind of so limited there. And you have to use your skill set quite transferably. So, I was alternating my time between the music industry and live events, which I loved, but I always knew my heart was in film. So I decided to branch out and move to Canada, where I, got lucky and became an assistant director, straight off the bat, pretty much. And from there, I, worked on a lot of features and different film and television shows. And then, sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water.
That is the biggest jug of water I've ever seen
I
in my
know it's a
life.
little emotional. Honestly, everyone on set has been making fun of me for it, but it does the job.
Oh my god,
um,
that's amazing. Sorry, go.
no,
Keep
sure.
going.
Yeah, so then I, found myself on Peacemaker, which I was so excited to be a part of, because I obviously knew who James Gunn was and Lars Winther and Simon Hatt, who are all people that I've admired for some time. And I actually started as an assistant director on that and got the opportunity to move to America and become an assistant to Simon and James Gunn through that. And here I am.
Wow. So you have traversed the globe essentially to
Exactly.
get where
Yeah,
you are.
that's
Uh,
it. Yeah.
we've heard very little about what it's like working in film and TV in Australia. Could you dig into that a little bit? I know I've heard from interviews with Hugh Jackman about this, very sort of limited space that you have to kind of grow in that industry. What was it like, kind of just making the jump and saying I'm going to Canada instead of say going to Los Angeles?
Right. So, I mean, the film and television industry in Australia is amazing. There are so many talented people there. But unfortunately, you find a lot of us, searching for work internationally because there just isn't the infrastructure in Australia
Hmm.
to really build a career of significance at the rate a lot of us are hoping to build it. I mean, there are so many fantastic programs, but overall, there just isn't enough work. It's very feast or famine. So, I mentioned working in that production industry, that production company that I created. And we were, ultimately quite successful within the realms of our community in Brisbane and the Gold Coast. But I kind of felt like there was a bit of a roadblock. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm advancing at the pace that I want to and that I'm comfortable with. So, like a lot of my colleagues and alumni, we've all, moved to London or moved to Vancouver. And that came about as opposed to Los Angeles. It's a lot easier for Australian citizens within a certain age demographic to get visas in other Commonwealth countries. So, it was a toss up between London and Vancouver, and my heart, for whatever reason, decided Vancouver. And yeah, that's how I got over into the northern hemisphere. and and yeah, it's a real shame. Like, I hope, one of my main goals is to really cultivate more opportunities for Australians in our home nation, because it's a pity that we can't have the same opportunity there. And a lot of that, I think, comes from government funding and incentives and things like that.
Yeah.
We're starting to see some progress in that area, but yeah, unfortunately, just not fast enough.
It seems that way, and hence the sort of Australian unicorns we have coming to Los Angeles. The Russell Crowes and the Baz Luhrmanns, who were just sort of uh, expanding on that. But that's just crazy. 'Cause I usually hear hey, I went to Los Angeles and I lived in my car for a year and I tried that out. Was there a lot of struggle once you sort of landed in Canada, or did it seem like it was a pretty straight? Because you had a whole a portfolio of work behind you. So what was it like just transferring right into Canada? Was it kind of a couple of years of struggle, or did it feel like you were just jumped right into the machine from the get go?
No, I'm not gonna lie. It was pretty rough.
Okay.
I packed up a suitcase. I had one suitcase with me, and I didn't really know anyone in Canada at all, particularly in the industry. And before I took off, I was working 3 jobs, just trying to make sure that I had a little bit of extra cash flow when I got there.
Mm.
And luckily enough, I actually worked on this arts festival. Um, a couple of years back. And in the speakeasy I was working in a few weeks before I left for Canada, these flamboyant, burlesque queens and acrobat came waltzing into this bar, and their producers were with them, and they remembered me, and they were like, Natasha, what's your plans for the next couple of months? And I told them I was moving to Canada, and this amazing producer told me that she knew someone from 10 years earlier who worked on the Montreal Comedy Film Festival. And she's like, look, I know it's not film, but here's his email address. I'm not sure if it's still active, but reach out to him and see if he's got any work going. And I was like, thank you so much. It's amazing. So I got to Canada. I was living in what they call a Nano studio, which is enough room for a twin size blow-up mattress, and that's about it. So I was living there, and I had my suitcase propped up as like a television stand, and I bought a $10 TV off Facebook Marketplace. And so I was living like that for a couple of months, working as a host at a restaurant. And I reached out to this email address, and I didn't hear anything back. So I was like, okay, I'll just search Facebook pages and look out for productions on the street. And eventually I got an email back, and he gave me a list of different people in the creative fields, and one of them was the first AD, Dale Bredson. And so I reached out to him, and he had a role for a trainee assistant director coming up on a indie production. And so I went in, and I was very honest. I said, look, my expertise are definitely in associate producing, but I feel like a lot of those skill sets are transferable. And so I ended up, getting the job. And from that moment, I was working, 18 to 20 hours a day in, day out. On weekends, I was meeting crew members who were doing short films and things like that. So I would volunteer my time on those, and just made sure that I always had another job lined up. And, by the end of my experience in Canada, it took within like about 2 years to really establish myself there. But by that point, I'd moved into a much larger apartment, and and had a huge community behind me. And so yeah, the first few months there, the first 6 months or so, I'm not gonna lie, it was super tough, not knowing anyone, not knowing the terminology on set.
Oh yeah.
It's quite different to back home. Also, just the structure and the hierarchy can be quite different as well. And I've even learnt that going from Canada to America. Like, there are a lot of major differences, but the main thing is like the fundamentals. If you understand the fundamentals, then you can make it happen anywhere. So yeah, no, it's been quite a journey.
I mean, that's the textbook journey, right? You don't expect to make it day one when you land somewhere. So like you said, Nano
Right.
Studio, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those days. Yeah,
Right.
that was
We've all
that
been
was rough.
starving artists at one point, I'm sure.
Exactly. But now, I mean, it looks like you're living fairly comfortably, and now that you moved to America, and it seems like you have a pretty good, just job position set up here for now, working, with James in the studio. What's your I don't want to ask what your end game is, but do you want to keep with the sort of the AD work, or do you want to stick with James? What's your ultimate position that you want to reach when it comes to filmmaking?
So ultimately, I really, see myself long term being a creative producer. And I definitely hope to stick, with James and his team. And, that's people like Lars Winther, who is arguably, in my opinion, definitely one of the best producer assistant directors in the business. Simon Hatt, who is also, one of my bosses, who is an executive producer. And, James, of course, himself, just because there's a really unique synergy between James's team, and that's something that I really want to be a part of, and I feel like I have so much to learn from. But I'm also, I work with a few other writers and producers, doing, my side thing. And Emsley Atisha, who is one of my good friends who I met in Canada, we are currently developing a few scripts, and sourcing funding right now. So I hope to, be involved in the indie world as well.
I have to ask, what do you write? Do you have a genre in mind, or do you write a little bit of everything?
It's pretty miscellaneous, if I'm going to be honest. I definitely am the type of person who, people feel comfortable sending me their scripts, and I'll go over it. And if I find something that, it within an outline that I think has potential, or is a story that really needs to be told, instantly, the light bulb goes off, and I'll sit down with this person and we'll start, writing together and collaborating and developing something there. So at the moment, what we have in the works is it's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like a coming of age story, but it's really ultimately a commentary on the different perspectives of feminism and how that, comes about in the average woman's life day in, day out. So it's kind of like a dramedy essentially. And then there's also, I work on a few sci-fi projects, which is based on my previous experience in film in Canada and America. That's totally my alley. So that's been really interesting as well. It's a lot of like AI and, it also touches base on kind of like a Truman Show aspect as well, which is really exciting. So
Really?
yeah, a couple of things in development.
Wow. How do you even have the time for that? Especially with you working on Guardians 3 right now, are you putting a kibosh on that for now, or do you scour out like an hour or so out of each day to try and
No,
get some of that done?
it is difficult. I mean, my major focus is, Simon and James, and being, as much of a right hand person as I can be. So that's definitely my priority. During Christmas hiatus or on my weekends, that's when I find myself, once I've done my research and everything for the next week ahead, that's when I kind of find a little moment to, give my friends a call and touch base and discuss how we're moving along. So
Yeah. Well, that's definitely something that's come up with this podcast starting during COVID was, what sort of keeps you sane when you're
mhm.
not working your day job. So, I mean, outside of it seems like you are somebody who can balance so many projects at once that I'm sure your brain is just it goes a little crazy. Because I know mine does too. But do you have anything that sort of keeps you sane or, or meditative? It could just be Netflixing, just
Right.
something that sort of helps you calm down a little bit.
Well, it's really interesting. I learned a lot about myself during the pandemic, as I'm sure many of people had that same journey. But basically, when everything shut down and I didn't have my mind and attention drawn in a million different directions, that's when I kind of felt completely at my lowest. I was like, I learned that in order for me to be happy or productive, I need to have, my hands in multiple different, pies essentially. So um, my downtime usually consists of listening to podcasts about the industry, including your own, uh, and also, researching shows that are coming into development that have reached my desk, going over scripts of films that I previously loved. But I am a normal human being as well, in the sense that I do like to uh, you know quiet the mind from time to time, and that usually involves going to jazz shows or comedy shows, just anything within the creative world. Um, and at the moment, I'm binging Pam and Tommy on Hulu, I believe. Have you heard of that show?
I just watched the first episode and I had to
Okay.
stop. It was like 3 in the morning. I said, I can't keep going. I have to wait and watch this. Is it does I mean, the first episode was amazing, but I assume it just keeps getting
Right.
better and better.
I mean, every episode for me has like a different feel ultimately.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Like episode two was quite strange in my experience, like the way I interpreted it. But then episode three, I was right back on board. So I don't know. The
Huh.
nostalgic factor of it all is something that really draws me in to any piece of content I'm consuming. So I love that. Um, and I'm a bit of a creature of habit, and I'm always rewatching Seinfeld and Sex and the City. That's my go-to.
Very, very different shows.
I know. It's all
What is
about balance.
what is it about those two shows that just is it the nostalgia factor or is there something else that ties you to those programs?
I think so. I
Yeah.
feel like I've definitely been conditioned a little bit by Sex and the City, in the sense that, like, I totally see myself someday living in New York and, indulging in this, stylish kind of fun, outgoing lifestyle. And I don't know, although that New York doesn't exist anymore. It's something that I like to see myself doing. And then with Seinfeld, that was one of the shows that my mum used to wake me up to watch when I was a little girl.
No
And
way.
so, yeah, no, she's like, actually, Seinfeld's on. So, I'd wake up and get really excited. And obviously, I didn't really understand the humor back then, but it just gets better with age. I can't fault it. I love Seinfeld. So,
That's such a crazy show to wake your child up to watch. Like with my
yeah.
mom, it was the X-Files, which I'm
Oh,
sure
right.
is also just ridiculous. But you'd think it was, I don't know, Step by Step or Seventh Heaven or something. Just
Right.
hey, Costanza's on. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't wait.
My favorite.
That's
I feel like
great.
X-Files would have been a little bit traumatizing almost though.
Uh, you know, ironically enough, the X-Files I've been completely fine with, except for there's the part in the title credits where this man is sort of screaming and his
Oh,
face
God.
is spinning.
Right.
That still freaks me out. But I think it was watching The Leprechaun at 4 years old that really threw me off because it was just on TV and I had no idea what was happening. So
Oh,
for a while, I thought leprechauns were real.
oh
Um,
my God. Oh,
but
no.
yeah, the X Files. If anything, it just said it showed me, hey, you're a serial TV fan. You're gonna love
Yeah.
this. What about horror movies or like darker sci-fi? Are you into those, or even writing those stories as well?
I'm totally open to it. A great place for horror development is actually Vancouver. Amongst the creative community there are so many people who are really into that genre specifically,
Hmm.
and it's something that I'm totally open to. As a teenager, like 14 to 16, all I would do is binge watch like horror films. One that I used to watch consistently before I went to bed was Prom Queen or Prom Night. Sorry.
Oh,
Um,
with Jamie Lee, right?
no, not the original.
Oh, the Brittany Snow
The Britney Snow
adaptation.
one. Yeah, I don't know why, but it was so comforting to me. I loved it. And I think we're in a new era of horror. That is, I don't know. It's such a different. There's that corny kind of horror that we grew up with in the 80s and the 90s
Yeah.
and things like that. And now with like A24, the new genre of horror, it's a lot more psychological, I find, and that's something that I would totally be interested in.
It almost sticks with you more, right? Even the trailers for it.
Yeah, it's not so it's, like, more unnervy. I find myself, like, kind of processing it for at least 3 days after. Even, like, things like Black Mirror, to me, that's totally a horror genre, and
Yeah.
that's the type of show I would have to, watch 1 episode a week or every 2 weeks because I just had to let my mind process it and come to terms with it and then assess it, so
It's that overwhelming feeling of dread instead of just, hey, stab, 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 blood. It's
right.
you're gonna have a hard time sleeping. So
And it hits so close to home. I mean, I feel like it taps into these fears that I feel like we're a little bit desensitized to the gore and the
yeah.
slashes and that element of like technologies taking over. It's something that we all kind of feel a little bit worried about, so as it seeps more and more into our day-to-day life. So yeah, I think that's really interesting and
Yeah.
something that's on the forefront of audiences' minds at the moment.
Is there, outside of prom night, is there a movie that you can watch now, but maybe once every couple of years because it is that impactful for you?
Hmm. Uh,
If there is one.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I think, funnily enough, one of the films I loved a lot as a child was Matilda. Um,
Oh.
and I don't get to watch it as much anymore because I'm an adult and it's not really, something that I watch for work purposes or entertainment. But there is something that like it evokes in me that I remember watching as a child, which kind of becomes a little bit sad in a way for me. The fact that I kind of related to this character so much as an outsider and someone who saw the world very differently and was kind of misunderstood. Um, that is a film that I was a child, it made me very happy, and now it kind of makes me a little bit sad.
Oh,
But at the same time, it has a very beautiful happy ending, and so that's comforting because I can also relate to that.
wow, that's actually a great selection. I can't tell you the last time I even saw Matilda, but the repressed memories that come back are always, you don't watch it, you know, like,
Yeah, exactly. And you
let it
don't
exist.
realize the impact it has until you rewatch it, you know? So,
Oh, totally. There's a series of movies that came out during that time. I think our whole generation is a little, more connected to than we should be
right.
for
That and
various ways.
Hereditary, of course.
Oh
That's
my god.
you can only watch once.
I can't tell you of any other theater experience where all of us were just sitting there while Tony Collette is wailing for 10 minutes straight,
Right.
where we're just looking at each other like, "Is this gonna stop? Should we stop? Should we go? This is
Right.
really uncomfortable." It's yeah, that Hereditary is a lot, but I mean, based on how, you remember Matilda and how that stuck with you, I'd say it's not hard pressed to assume maybe you could write something similar to that, and develop a movie that has that impact as well. I mean, have you ever thought about going into adaptations as well, or are you sticking to solely original work?
Um, I feel like, we're definitely riding this wave of adaptations right now. And it's everywhere. And as much as I love it, I love that nostalgic factor, as we've mentioned. I think there needs to be a space and consideration for original content.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of promising young screenwriters are kind of being uh, really disheartened by the fact that we keep going back and like sourcing from old material. And there's so many stories to be told, and there's so many that have been overlooked in favor for, the almost guaranteed profit of adaptations. So going back to, basics and finding people who have a story to tell, I think ultimately that's where I see my career going, and is picking those original stories, especially because, we're creating these adaptations and we're including more diverse casts and perspectives and things like that, which is fantastic. But there are people, screenwriters who are genuinely telling their story, from a perspective of a minority.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit more genuine to that experience. And a lot of those stories aren't being told organically. And I think that's really important as well, that we make space for that.
Yeah, I will admit, I have 10 plus scripts that are just sitting on my hard drive, that have
Oh,
been
yeah.
sent, yeah, throughout, and it is really, it is disheartening to hear from news outlets that, oh yeah, the spec script is dead, or we
Mhm.
want something that's a guaranteed IP. But
Right.
it's really cool where you're at because you do have, other eyes that, in the future, maybe in your downtime, could offer some sort of advice or critiques to your work, like James or Simon,
Hmm.
who have built their careers on being completely obscure and doing things outside of the norm, and now that is being so welcomed and brought in. I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of, James making Peacemaker.
Hmm.
So, with all that being said, do you feel like there's, uh I don't want to say there's more of a sort of backup to, up and coming screenwriters now than there were before, but it seems like there's, I don't know, there's a growing acceptance of that sort of obscure perspective. Would you agree with that, or is that something that's, it might be 50-50?
No, I totally agree with that. I think, I don't know, the unique thing about James's concept is it's very much, surface level. People would be, if they hadn't watched James's previous work or anything like that, and they see, oh, another superhero show or
Mm.
another superhero movie, you kind of assume that it's going to be, something that fits into the format, as many of the other versions do. A lot of them are quite similar in the way that they're told, but then you go in and it's completely unique. It's completely, emotional and chaotic, and you can identify it as a James Gunn piece of work. And I think, we see that in other directors like, Taika.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and they're really kind of, I think, uh, the modern day kind of, or the future kind of aspiring directors and producers can look at and be like, I don't have to conform necessarily. I can bring my own unique taste into something in a commercial space and it be acknowledged and praised and understood. Something about Taika that I really admire is that he's from New Zealand, and so his sense of humor is something that I totally understand. I grew up with a lot of Maori people in my life. My best friends, a lot of them are Maori people, and their sense of humor is one of the funniest across the globe. And I always thought it's so niche to that portion of the world, it would be really difficult to communicate that on a global scale. But Taika does that so seamlessly in his work, in productions that are made by Marvel, which is crazy to me. I think that that's so admirable. So I totally feel like there is a lot of space for the next big thing to be unique and true to your brand.
You hit the nail on the head bringing up Taika. He's it's weird to see that it's almost like British comedy. When British comedy,
Right.
at least from my perspective, came over to the West, into the US, a lot of people still to this day do not appreciate it because they can't wrap their head around what they deem as alternative comedy.
Hmm.
But what everyone else sees is just genuine comedic talent. So
Right.
it's really cool to see that also being welcomed. Him going from Boy and What We Do in the Shadows to directing, like you said, Marvel movies, and then having his take on it is insane. Thor Ragnarok was one of the funniest, and still is one of the funniest movies I've seen,
Oh,
just because of those
absolutely.
bits.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you writing comedy now that we've brought up comedy? I need to ask: do you find it really challenging, or are you just quick-witted with the keyboard and you're like, oh yeah, I have that joke and dialogue set?
It is difficult. I feel like I like to crack a lot of jokes in my day to day, and it is funny because working on set in Canada and America, like our senses of humor, like you mentioned, is quite different to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like it takes a long time for people to understand my sense of humor. I don't know if it's the accent or my delivery or what it is, but I'm always cracking jokes whether people get it or not. Um, but writing that into scripts is, I don't know, I always envision it as it's playing out.
Mm.
And so articulating that in dialogue is something that I hope I do well. I'm always looking for feedback on it, but I do like to incorporate that element as much as possible. And I think, as long as you write it in there and then you have a director that understands the humor and communicates that to
Exactly.
the actor, then it's pretty straightforward, and it's something that you just need to trust your team. You know what I mean? You make sure you hire a director who understands the script as well as they need to.
So the water bottle you brought up earlier was not part of the joke, right?
I was hoping that if things got awkward, I could just rip it out and we could switch the topic. So
it was sort of akin to when Christoph Waltz removes that giant pipe in Inglorious Bastards, and it's
oh
just so
yeah.
big for his pocket that I just thought, well, I think this is a choice and it's working. So
No.
that's yeah, that's so true because there's a lot of, at least directors in contemporary cinema and contemporary comedy that don't quite understand what their writers are making. So it comes off as this sort of lame duck joke that just doesn't hit
Hmm.
a lot of the mainstream stuff. And there's a myriad of video essays that cover that. Why British or Kiwi humor is so much more outlandish and actually works better than American humor. Uh,
Hmm.
but I do wonder with your writing process as well. And I asked a few writers this also: when you're sitting down to write a script,
Hmm.
there are a couple different ways you could do it, but my way is essentially just bleeding over a dry erase board, or maybe a few of them, and then going
Hmm.
into an outline. But some like to just go bullet point by bullet point into an outline. What's your sort of approach to it? Is it chaotic or is it more of a structured approach?
It depends. If I sometimes if I've been neglecting it too much, I will, schedule it, and I'll throughout the week give myself a few dot points if I have an idea, and I'll create like a little bit of an outline off of that.
Oh, cool.
And so
Okay.
I can remember where my headspace is at when I'm having those thoughts. And then I take that structure and then I go crazy. So then I'll just start, typing all these different things, and I'll be like, oh, and this should be playing in the background, and we should actually have like, and I'll write in camera direction as well. And it's kind of just, a chaotic document. And from that, I will then go back and kind of categorize it and organize it, and format it so it makes sense and is digestible. Um, and also, like, one of my favorite things to do, because a lot of my works are collaborations,
Mhm.
is to set up a little writing session. My mentor Troy Armstrong, who I mentioned previously, who was one of my university professors, he would often grab a group of budding writers and filmmakers, and we would go to like a really great park bench overlooking the beach, and we would sit down, and he would kind of give us these tools to learn how to um, you know uh, generate conversations as if we were in a writer's room.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that was super beneficial to me, so I really try and incorporate that in my process today, where I'll go to a friend's house and we'll put on some good music, and some essential oils diffusing, and kind of create an environment where it feels like we're relaxing, we're having a good time, and we're going to just start talking about things. And we'll be like, okay, let's get our pen and paper and let's start writing this down. And I feel like when you have a soundboard like that to jump ideas off as well, um, you can be on two completely different pages, and then through that process, kind of take the strengths from both perspectives and streamline it into something fantastic. So that's part of my process that I really enjoy also.
That's really badass. I don't think a lot of people have when you think about collaborate, at least when I collaborate with another writer, we just meet at a coffee shop or we're
Right.
in a living room, and it's relaxing, but it's not just, I mean, essential oils and music. That's the most
Maybe it's a
relaxing
little
way.
extra.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to try it. I mean,
Right.
I might have to tell my partner like, "Hey, man, peppermint's gonna smell, throughout the house, but it's gonna be great." That's incredible. Have you noticed that? I guess a increased rate of progress with being that relaxed, or was it kind of
Oh,
distracting
totally.
at first? Oh, really?
No, for me anyway, I mean, I feel like my other writers and producer friends feel it's beneficial, because then from that one meeting, we can go off and we know where the other's mind's at. And so from there, we can go home and we can just do our regular process individually. But it helps just, you know, recreate that synergy, so it's not completely, okay, here's my side. Oh, wait, we're on different pages here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not like a every time I write kind of thing, but I feel like it definitely benefits us.
Yeah, it seems like it sets more of that workshop aura
Yeah,
where it's, hey, we're just here to throw out ideas and see what sticks, what lands, what might work for us. I'm gonna have to try that. That's really exciting because I never thought about that before.
for sure.
You're almost seducing your writing partners. Uh, I do want to pivot into, you know, uh, I guess still sticking with your writing, but is that something that you'd like to bring over into? I know Peacemaker was renewed for season 2. James is
Mhm.
working on a bunch of other projects. Is that sort of in the forefront of your mind of possibly throwing your hat in the ring with some of James' projects, or would you like to sort of stick with your own and build stuff from a different standpoint?
I am so in awe every day that I have the opportunity to work with James.
Mhm.
I told him this story the other day, actually, where I grew up on the Gold Coast. We have Warner Brothers Studios, like Village Roadshow Studios, which is attached to Warner Brothers Movie World.
Oh, cool.
And as a kid, I loved Scooby Doo 1 and 2. And, of course, James had like a huge role in both of those films. And my favorite roller coaster as a little girl was the Scooby Doo coaster. And the fact that I work every day with the human whose brain that came from, is just so incredible to me. And so, I have a lot of admiration for the way James works and the teams he creates around him. So ultimately, I hope to stay on board with him and Simon as long as possible. And I really do see potential for my career to grow through that. And at the moment, I'm still relatively new to this assistant position. I was actually, an AD on Peacemaker, and then
Yeah.
got offered the position as his assistant and as Simon's assistant. So, along with Samina Muntz, who I work very closely as well. And you know, they're so open to involving us in the process. On the occasion, we'll be required to they'll ask us, what are your thoughts on this? Things like that. And just learning, you know, how to take a film from conceptualization through to pre-production to production to post on this scale, is something that I feel like every day I'm learning and evolving. And I feel like, yeah, there's eventually, I hope to have a little bit more leeway in the development process. And I think that is something that excites me every day to be involved in that. So I'm looking forward to particularly Peacemaker season 2. I know you had Spencer on the show recently.
Yeah.
um he is such a class act. Like, he is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. He's so professional. Everyone on set loves that kid. And I really enjoyed his podcast, actually. It was really great listening to. But getting the old band back together and working on that, in this current role, I'm totally excited to be a part of that process.
That's so cool. And the fact that you get to work with, for lack of a better word, your childhood hero or one of your childhood heroes,
Right.
who isn't, they always say never meet your heroes because bad stuff happens. But, he seems like such a genuine and humble artist that, you're in the perfect spot to sort of build a sort of mentorship, but also learn, from everybody else in the process because they keep a tight knit ship, it seems like,
Right.
right?
Oh,
That's
absolutely. And going back to
incredible.
the humor element as well, like,
Yeah.
we were discussing, as long as the director understands the writer's thoughts, for a lot of James's projects, he's the writer and the director. So, his sense of humor, there's so many layers to it in especially in Peacemaker. I mean, there's the jokes that are kind of like very in your face and crude, but then there's also like these deep political, points and humor, and that's something that is just masterful to me. So, they say never meet your heroes, but it's only been every time I've met one of mine, it's been nothing but greatness. So
Oh, that's
I
amazing. I
recommend
think,
it. I recommend it.
yeah, that's don't be scared to meet your heroes. Just, don't freak out on them. I think that's the, the
Yeah,
biggest key.
play cool, play cool.
Yeah, yeah, they're just people. I'm not sweating. It's fine. What is your day to day like now that you're working on Guardians 3? I know you guys are probably just swamped. You said, it's getting hotter in Atlanta too, so it's just longer days in the humid heat. What is your day to day like now working on that production? Is it Monday through Friday, or are you basically on call on the weekends as well?
Well, I must give a shout out to James and Lars for always keeping the day usually 10 hours,
Oh
pretty
wow.
consistently. So that's
Wow.
a blessing for those of us who work on set, know that it can be anywhere up to like 18-hour days. So I mean, that's a huge plus. But it's been so much fun. I don't know that because this is the third volume. A lot of the crew and cast have been on it for the whole three projects. So it's coming into that atmosphere was a little bit daunting at first, but everyone's been so welcoming and fantastic. But my day to day usually involves, getting to set, making sure everyone's set up accordingly, and checking in with, you know, each department, whether it be visual effects or previs or, the post supervisors, and just basically getting all of the information that is trying to get to the producers and James, and just funneling that down and then prioritizing it. And then it's also, reviewing cuts and, just making sure that we're at where we need to be, and taking notes and things like that. So also a lot of like dealing with publicity and the reps and things like that, touching base to, the publicists, Usually it's funny because we're usually working on multiple projects at a time. Now Peacemaker has wrapped. We are just on, Guardians, which is for the first time since I've worked for James, it's only been the one project. So that's super refreshing. But also just researching, different things that are coming across the desk and making sure that I'm well versed in those projects in case they come to fruition. So yeah, that's kind of my day to day at the moment. And on the weekend, sometimes we'll do interviews or things like that.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, it's pretty fun. But I'm the type of assistant. I feel like it varies from
Hmm.
for every different person, different production, different boss. But I'm a set creature. I love being on set. I love the highs, the lows, the feeling of being in the trenches, and the camaraderie and the shared experience. So I'm someone who's always, within ear's reach of the team, and I like to work from set mostly. So that's. I feel like there's so much to learn there, and in order to be a great writer and producer, I think it's so important to have a fundamental, understanding of how each department works and how they all work together. I mean, if you're familiar with set, you see like the chaos of the setups and this person going this way. And it's to me, I just sit back and I hear like classical music and it's like a ballet or, an orchestra at work. It's so amazing to me. And I hope I never lose that that perspective of it all. But yeah, I definitely prefer to do my work mostly from set. So
That's beautiful. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My first job was an extra on the Lone Ranger in Colorado
okay.
and Utah. And it was the same thing when they weren't shooting the extras and they were doing, the B side. I would just stand there and watch. And before you know it, an hour and a half goes by and you just see this organized chaos, this living organism
Mhm.
appear of just hundreds of people working together. It's just beautiful. So that the fact that you get to, most days work on set, doing everything, from an administrative point, but also watching this happen, that's just amazing. I'm sure it's surreal every single time too.
Absolutely, absolutely, and um, being on set as well, it allows you to really engage in what's being shot, and you hear, the director note, oh, that's my favorite. This one's this favorite and stuff. So going back and watching the dailies or the editor's cuts, you kind of are like, oh, I remember that, and you can kind of piece together the moment that that happened and what us allowed us to get that performance or
Yeah.
that correct lighting and things like that. So I'm always trying to factor that into my day-to-day experience.
So you have access to dailies. Hmm. Interesting. Uh, spoilers. No, I'm just kidding.
No way, my list is
Any
filled.
every time I hear somebody that works within the Marvel machine, oh yeah, I get to see dailies. Like, la 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 la. Yeah, I just um, that's really cool. It's so interesting watching, not watching, listening to your story from Australia to Canada to here. I can't even imagine where your career is going to go anywhere but up, essentially
Oh,
from
thank you.
the same because it, you've approach this from behind the scenes, and I think
Mhm.
that's very important for surviving this industry. Until you know what it's like to work behind the scenes, you're not going to understand the full machine itself. uh
Right.
so this is just a long-winded way of me asking, with your years of experience and working on these fun projects, working with James and Spencer, do you have what we call a party story? So this, I'm sure you heard Spencer's, but essentially a story you would share at a party that just stuck out so much, you can't help but just have it ready to go for, when you're having cocktails with a friend, or you're, just meeting somebody new and you have something really funny or maybe completely disheartening to share. That's the beauty of party stories, everybody, is it could be absolutely anything. Do you have
Um,
anything of that nature?
because the last few years have been such a whirlwind, I
Oh yeah.
feel like the entirety of it is in itself a party story. And it's going to make a great autobiography one day if I ever get to that point. Um, but the thing that sticks out to me the most is actually a story from when I was producing a tourism campaign back in Australia. So this, I think, because everything is so fresh and raw to me, this is something
Ooh.
that I can reminisce on. But we were a tiny crew, and it was a tourism campaign for the Australian government, and we're out in the outback. And I grew up on on the coast
On
of
the
Australia.
coast.
This was my real first time experiencing those conditions, and it was the peak of summer. And I looked the part. I had the cork hat on, and I kind of looked a bit like Steve or Bindi Irwin in a sense. But there is a lot of purpose to those outfits. It's not just for the look. It keeps you alive. And I learned that firsthand because we were out by a billabong in the desert, like in the outback. And a billabong for non-Australians is like a large body of water, kind of like an oasis, but not as beautiful. And we had rented this ute, this truck, to take us out to this billabong, and it was on this property that was super vast, and it was a long time getting out there. And so we're finally out there, and we're there all day trying to get this shot of these like really rare, beautiful native Australian birds flying over the billabong. And because it was such a small crew, I was the only one who was kind of available to run like around this billabong trying to get the birds in flight to go up and over to get this amazing shot. And so I'm dying. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. I was
Fahrenheit.
120 degrees, maybe something along those lines. It was unbelievable. So I'm running and running and running, and like, no, reset, back to ones, let's go again. And so by the end of it, we're all just drenched, dying in sweat. And we start loading the equipment back up into the car, and we start the car. And I think because it was so hot, it just won't start. And so we're like, okay, what are we going to do? We start looking around, and I noticed there's crocodile skeletons everywhere. So this billabong is infested with crocodiles. There's no meals for them within miles. So I start kind of panicking a little bit, and we couldn't do anything. So we started like measuring each other's legs, going, okay, who's going to get the furthest if one of us goes seeks help? Who's willing to volunteer? And we ended up just laying under the bottom of the car there, trying to protect our faces from the sun. And it was so hot, our water was gone, our Gatorade had fermented, and we were like, this is it, this is how we go. I mean, at least we died doing something we love. And the boys also lighting up their cigarettes, just laying under there, just waiting for help. Eventually the property owner came looking for us because we were gone for so many hours, and saved us. But that was an experience, a true Australian experience as well, that I will forever remember as the dangers of having a love for this industry is getting in situations like that sometimes.
I love that it was for a tourism project too.
Yeah. Really sold it, didn't I?
Yeah, come to Australia, just not this part.
Yeah. Or just
Uh,
make sure you're with a company that service works in those regions.
oh my god, yeah, I had definitely learned something. I had no idea that there was such a thing, called the Billabong. I thought it was just a clothing company or whatever that was from
Right.
the early 2000s. So I
No,
had no idea.
that's what.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
it was crazy.
That's did you see any actual crocodiles though, or were you
Not
just
on that location,
okay.
but many other locations we shot. We were in just like little tinnies,
Mm.
which are those little metal boats, and there was crocs, going past us and things like that. And when people say to me all the time, over here in the States, they're like, "Oh, Australia's so scary." I'm like, "No, it's not that bad." But then I remember those those experiences. I'm like, "Yeah, it can be in certain areas for sure." Um, but yeah, we saw a lot of crocodiles, and the locals would often say, "Oh, they're just freshies. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between a freshie and a salty?" And they're like, "Well, a salty will, eat you, whereas a freshie will just kind of nibble at you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that makes it so much better. Great." Um, but yeah, in contrast to my life over here, working on Peacemaker, we were filming in freezing temperatures, all night shoots at one point. I'd be bunkered down in the bottom of, the Peacemaker car. And John would be like, "You good, kid?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, good, John." Like, I've lived many lives through this industry. We shot in a few mental asylums and abandoned hotels with mafia stories. So it's always an adventure, which I love.
That is, yeah, that is the beauty of this very nomadic industry.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if it's a very cheap location, you have to ask, okay, well, what happened in the last 10 to 20 years
Yeah.
that it is so cheap?
Can I have a safety report, please? Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. I think the at the very least of your worries would be asbestos. Outside of that, it just
Oh,
keeps
God.
going up and up and up.
Exactly.
Uh, that is a crazy party story too. I I don't know. We get a lot of party stories where it's interacting with a celebrity or just something a little more held in civilization. But that
Right.
is out in nature. Yeah, maybe somebody will help out. If not, this is the way we go. Uh,
Yeah.
that's insane. With the many lives you've lived in this industry, and just the stories you're going to keep accruing and experiences you're going to keep accruing for the rest of your career, do you have any piece of advice that maybe somebody gave you that you've held on to, maybe something that you've just come up with on your own that you'd like to instill on our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, as I mentioned earlier, uh, I knew there wasn't a straight path for me to get where I needed to go. So I had to be okay with and open myself up to, being an event coordinator for a modeling agency, or being a content producer for a production company, or being a locations PA in Canada when, because I'm a non-permanent resident,
Mm.
with the union and things like that. Sometimes I wouldn't be able to get a permit, so I would have to go back into a PAing position.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think the thing that I have, the piece of advice that I would pass on would be that no matter what position you hold, um, treat it and admire it for what it is, and value how important that is to getting you to where you need to be. Even if you're the PA who shows up every day and has to change the bins first thing in the morning, and the bins at wrap, that's something that I've had to do, and I made sure I did the best job at it I possibly could. I made sure that the bins were always empty. And then it comes back up to, the high level positions where you're an associate producer or a talent liaison, and making sure that everyone is comfortable, that you double check everything you've scheduled, or when it comes to the writing, like, just take as much pride in whatever position it is, that you're currently doing, and trust that it is an important step on where you need to go.
Yeah.
And in doing that, that's what ultimately helped me get recognized, is that I took my jobs always super seriously. And I'm a hard worker. I like to joke around. I like to have fun. And I love, creating families on set. But I never let that uh, cloud how important my jobs were to the production. And just looking at production as an organism in itself, try not to be so close minded. It's like, oh, well, all I have to do is do this. And if I don't do that, it doesn't really matter. It's not
Yeah.
true. Those jobs are there for a reason, and always have the efficiency and quality of production as the forefront goal in your mind for day to day work. And ultimately, you'll be recognized as a hard worker and someone who cares about their job. And that's what's really helped me.
Wow. And it shows with your resume and then just talking to you as well. I know I've seen them. I know you've seen them. There are PAs that get into this because they think, oh, I'm going to get into a writer's room, or I'm going to become a director, and they don't show their or actually any love for what
Mhm.
they're doing day one, and that's an immediate red flag. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's easy to get complacent or disheartened because of sometimes the hours and the work
yeah,
conditions, and you feel like sometimes it doesn't matter if you're there, someone could just do that job. Make sure that you are irreplaceable by being dedicated and motivated as much as possible. And also something that I learned is, I once had an AD pull me aside and they said, how well did you do today? And I was like, oh, there was so much more I could have improved on. And they said, oh, it's funny because I was actually going to say, you did a really fantastic job and I really admire how you work, and I want to bring you on to the next project. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah, but sometimes keeping that humility and that mindset of, like, not being hard on yourself to the point it's detrimental, but always thinking, what can I do better tomorrow? Even if you've had a tough day, try and start the day with that mindset. And ultimately, that'll allow you to never get complacent and keep moving up quickly.
Yeah, that how many times have you had to tell yourself on like a non-union shoot, I'll be okay. I'll run through it tomorrow. I'm gonna work my ass off
Yeah.
and it'll be
Oh my
fine.
god. Oh my god. There's been some, MOW experiences where you're the set deck, you're the
Yeah.
you're the grip. You're, you're all of these different roles because the situation just calls for it.
Yeah.
And you're jumping off, stages and you're doing this. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's just got to look at it as like, oh man, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
This is the office, and I'm going to get where I need to be. And if it's really a terrible day, a shitty day, like I said earlier, it's going to be great in the autobiography.
Yeah.
That always helps as well.
Oh yeah. Any day on set is better than any day in an office.
Amen. Amen.
Even if it's 20 hours.
Exactly.
This is also something really interesting. I'm curious. We like to promote, our guests' projects or something they're really passionate about for their episode. Is there anything in particular that you'd like for us to promote?
I would just ultimately recommend to, if you haven't already, check out Peacemaker. It's
It's so good,
a
guys.
tiny little small project that we've just completed on HBO Max. That show honestly changed my life, and to share that humor, we were always laughing on that set throughout production. So hopefully, it can bring a little light into people's lives. But also, keep an eye out for some projects I have in development. One is called Liberated, which I'm really excited about. So hopefully that will, pop up eventually on your screens. So if you see it, be sure to give it a watch.
Oh, that's perfect. And I needed to ask more writers this. We had one of the writers from It's Always Sunny come on the show a few months ago, and she she gave a shout out to her local coffee shop. So if you are a coffee fan or a tea fan, is there a coffee shop near you, or maybe not even near you, a coffee shop you really enjoy that you'd like to promote?
Yes. I live in Atlanta currently, and there is a coffee shop that is my go-to on a Saturday morning to start my weekend, and that's called The Drip, which
Ooh,
is it's kind of like an East Atlanta. It's fantastic, great vibes. Always people in there, shooting content or writing scripts. Like it seems to be like quite a little industry hotspot.
that's
And then shout out to my coffee girls at our studio as well. I can't say their names or where it is, but if you're listening, thank you for getting us through those tough days.
I am definitely going to visit the Drip. I'm going to Atlanta. Oh my god, in July,
Okay.
to just do some networking stuff. So I'm definitely going to check out that coffee shop, and hopefully it's just as great as you say it is.
Well, Australians are quite particular with their coffee, so um, it's one of the
Oh really?
best places I've had in the US in general so far. So
Oh
hopefully
man,
it lives up to your expectations.
my expectations are very low. I love diner coffee, so anything outside of that, I'm like, oh, it's perfect.
Is there anywhere in Colorado you could recommend?
Ooh, so there is a very wonderful company that is local to my area called Allegro Coffee Shop, and it's sort of in northern Colorado. They have a few different distribution houses, but they have this. Oh my God, what's the full name of it? It's an espresso blend that I'll
Oh
use.
wow.
So I was up till 3 or 4 writing last night because we're submitting for something, and I had a full pot of that. I felt great, and I slept right afterwards. So it doesn't make you shake. It's just, and it tastes amazing. So that's definitely something. I'll ship you a bag of coffee beans.
Great.
Um,
I'll link you to this water bottle.
is that a gallon?
It is. It is a gallon.
Okay, all right. I was about to say because for a second it looked a little larger than a gallon. I don't know why she needs it, but it's an Australian thing, maybe. I don't know. This
It's
is
because I usually drink a gallon of coffee a day, so I'm trying to like substitute that for water. Be a little healthier.
it's like 1 part coffee, 2 parts water. Is that
Yeah,
what you're going for?
you might be
Well,
onto something.
I'm sure you're as purified as anybody else could be. I had so much fun talking to you. This has been great. We're gonna do a few things before we end the episode or end the recording.
Mhm.
Uh, But I did just want to say thank you for giving your time. I think it's just really awesome. People are willing to do this, especially everybody from the Peacemaker job. Like Spencer was amazing. You've been amazing. I just can't even imagine who we'll talk to next. But I do need to thank our listeners for listening to this episode and or watching the video if we keep doing the YouTube thing. I don't know. My hair's not set for that for this recording, but we'll see. If you enjoy this podcast, please let us know. Share your review, give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and then send us an email to pwrp.pod@gmail.com, and we will send you a thank you card and a sticker for your trouble and for your loyalty. And Natasha, you're also getting a thank you card and a sticker if you like. I
Thank you.
Spencer was all about it, and then he never sent me his address. So I said,
Oh,
all
yeah.
right, fine. I'll email you in a couple months and see what happens.
I can follow up for that as well if you need me to.
I'll send you a couple of them.
Okay.
And oh my God, what else? Sorry, my co-host isn't here, so I'm trying to figure out what else the rest of the spiel is. Aha! Oh, if you would also like to be on this podcast, whether you're somebody who works in the arts industry or someone who is really interested in it and maybe wants to get in, we'd love to talk to you as well. Send us an email at the same address, pwrp.pod@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you right away. Now, Miss Natasha, the last thing I need from you is an awkward goodbye, which I'm sure you may have listened to with Spencer's episode. So I'll do a silent Wayne's World countdown. And when I point, give us your most awkward verbal goodbye. It's always a lot of fun trying this out to see who does what. So if you're ready, I'm going to start.
Okay. All right.
No one's ever ready for purposefully being awkward. All right.
Actually. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to see you again soon.